My mother's finger was still trembling when she pointed it at my chest, right there in the middle of her dining room, in front of my brother, my aunt, and a plate of untouched cornbread. "You'll transfer every property in your name to your father, Andrea, or you will never step foot in this house again." I want you to understand something before I go any further. I wasn't raised to talk back to my mother, Christiane Bryant Briggs. I was raised to say, "Yes, ma'am," to fold my hands in church, to let grown folks finish their sentences. So when I stood there in that yellow-walled dining room on Oakhurst Avenue in Decatur, Georgia, 31 years old with my own set of keys jingling in my purse, and I heard those words come out of my own mother's mouth, my body went numb before my mind caught up. Before we continue, please hit that like button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story reaches. Now, let's continue. "My father," I repeated, slow, like the words tasted wrong, because the man she meant wasn't my father. Not by blood, not by anything except a marriage certificate signed 4 years ago, and a habit she'd built of correcting anyone who called him Roland instead of Daddy in front of company. Roland Briggs sat at the head of the table, dabbing his mouth with a napkin like this was any other Sunday dinner. He didn't even look up. "Say something," my mother snapped, her bracelets clinking as her arm dropped back to her side. I looked at my brother Malik, hoping for an ally, but he was staring hard at his plate, like the mashed potatoes held the answers to a test he hadn't studied for. "Those properties belong to Grandma Odessa," I said, keeping my voice level even as my heart hammered. "She left them to me, specifically me. You were in the room when the lawyer read the will, Mama. That was before you disrespected this family," she said. "Before you turned your back on your own father." I laughed. I couldn't help it. A short, disbelieving laugh that made my Aunt Pearl flinch. Because 3 months ago, I hadn't turned my back on anybody. I'd asked a question. One simple, reasonable question about $83,000 that had vanished from Grandma's estate account. And apparently, that question was the crime. To understand why my grandmother put 3 properties in my name and not my mother's, you have to understand who Odessa May Bryant was. She raised 6 children in a 2-bedroom shotgun house on Flat Shoals Road, worked 31 years at a textile plant, and by the time she passed at 78, she owned outright the family home in Decatur, a duplex on Boulevard in Old Fourth Ward, and a small brick house in East Point she rented out for $1,100 a month. She built that from nothing, from nickels and Sundays, and refusing to let anybody talk her out of what was hers. She loved my mother. That much I never doubted. But she didn't trust her judgment when it came to money. Not after watching Christiane co-sign for 2 of my uncle's failed business ventures. Not after watching her drain her own 401k to bail my cousin Kira's fiancé out of a check fraud charge that turned out to be entirely his doing. "Your mama got a soft heart and hard head when it come to men who flatter her," Grandma told me once, rocking on her porch with sweet tea sweating in her hand. I was 26 then, sitting on the steps below her. I ain't leaving nothing for a man to talk her out of. She said it plain in her will, notarized and witnessed. The properties go to Andrea, to be managed for the benefit of the family, but never transferred, sold, or signed over, except by Andrea's own hand and judgment. I didn't ask for that responsibility. I inherited it the way you inherit your mother's temper or your father's stubborn jaw, whether you wanted it or not, and for 2 years I did right by it. I kept the East Point tenants' rent reasonable. I paid the property taxes on time. I even let my mother and Roland live in the Decatur house rent-free after they sold their own place in Riverdale to invest in a business opportunity that Roland brought to the table. I didn't know yet that the business opportunity was the first domino. Roland Briggs came into our lives the way certain men do, smooth, quiet, generous with compliments, and stingy with specifics. My mother met him at a real estate seminar in College Park, 18 months after my biological father, James Bryant, died of a heart attack in a Waffle House parking lot at 52 years old. I understood the loneliness. I did. My mother had loved my father for 26 years, and grief makes people reach for whatever hand is closest. But something about Roland never sat right with me. The way he'd casually ask, over dinner, what the East Point property was renting for, or how much equity was in the duplex, framed always as harmless curiosity. "He's just trying to get to know the family business, baby," my mother said the first time I brought it up. "That's what a husband does." Except Roland wasn't managing anything. He'd never held a steady job the whole time I'd known him, always between opportunities, always waiting on a deal that was 6 weeks from closing. And 6 months into the marriage, he started calling himself my father in front of people who didn't know better. At my cousin's wedding, he introduced himself to a stranger as father of the bride's side, gesturing toward me like I was livestock at auction. I let it go. I told myself it was harmless posturing, a man trying to claim a family that had accepted him. Then Grandma Odessa's estate account came up $83,000 short, and Roland's name was on 3 withdrawal slips my mother swore she never signed. I found them by accident, going through the estate paperwork to file the annual property tax documents. 3 withdrawals, each just under $10,000, the threshold that avoids automatic bank reporting, spaced 2 weeks apart, each authorized with what looked like my mother's signature. Except I'd seen my mother's signature my whole life, on report cards and permission slips and the back of tax refund checks. This wasn't it. The loops were wrong. The pressure was wrong. I brought it to her privately, in her kitchen, over coffee, the way you're supposed to handle family business. Quiet, respectful, no accusations. "Mama, did you authorize these withdrawals from Grandma's account?" She went still. Then she said, "Too fast. Roland handled some of the estate paperwork for me. I trust him. These aren't your signature. Are you calling my husband a thief?" Her voice climbed an octave, and I watched something close behind her eyes, a door shutting. "I'm asking a question," I said. "That's all. $83,000 is a lot of money to just disappear." She set her coffee cup down so hard it cracked the saucer. "That money is this family's money. You didn't earn it. Odessa was my mother, not yours." That sentence landed somewhere I didn't expect it to hurt. I'd spent every Sunday of my childhood at that woman's table. I'd been the one who drove her to chemo appointments the year she fought breast cancer at 73, the one who sat with her the night she died. But in my mother's mouth, in that moment, I was suddenly an outsider being asked to explain myself for protecting what had been legally, deliberately, lovingly left to me. I didn't know it then, but that cracked saucer was the first crack in everything. 2 weeks later, my mother called what she referred to as a family meeting, which really meant she'd gathered an audience for an ambush. My Aunt Pearl was there, along with my brother Malik, my cousin Kira, and Roland, seated at the head of the table, like a man presiding over a courtroom he already knew he'd win. "Andrea thinks Roland stole from this family," my mother announced, before I'd even sat down, skipping past any pretense of a discussion. "I never said stole," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I asked about 3 withdrawals that don't match your signature. That's a legitimate concern with an estate I'm legally responsible for." Roland finally spoke, folding his hands like a man about to deliver a sermon. "Andrea, I understand grief makes people suspicious. Losing your grandmother, watching your mother remarry, that's a lot of change. But accusing family of theft, that's a serious thing." "I haven't accused anyone," I said. "I've asked for documentation. That's what any executor would do." "You're not an executor," Malik cut in, surprising me. "You're a beneficiary who got lucky." I stared at my brother, a man I'd shared a room with until I was 11, a man whose college tuition I'd helped pay when our father's insurance fell through. Lucky, I repeated. Grandma should have split things evenly, he said, not meeting my eyes. Everybody knows it. You just got the paperwork that says otherwise. And there it was, the resentment I'd suspected but never confirmed, sitting bare on the table between the sweet tea and the potato salad. My own brother believed I'd stolen something simply by being trusted. I want to be clear because I know how these stories get told. I didn't storm out. I didn't scream. I sat at that table and I offered something my grandmother herself would have been proud of, a compromise. I'll hire an independent forensic accountant, I said. Someone neutral, not connected to any of us. If the withdrawals check out as legitimate estate expenses, I'll never bring it up again. If they don't, we handle it as a family, quietly, without lawyers, without police. Silence. Roland's jaw tightened for half a second before he smoothed it back into that practiced calm. That's not necessary, my mother said. This is a trust issue, Andrea. You either trust your family or you don't. I do trust family, I said. I don't automatically trust unverified signatures on withdrawal slips. Those are two different things. Aunt Pearl, who'd been quiet the whole meeting, finally spoke. Sounds reasonable to me. Christian, independent accountant can't hurt nobody if there's nothing to hide. My mother's eyes flicked toward Roland, just a flicker, barely a second, before she said, "We'll think about it." They never called me back about the accountant. Instead, 3 weeks later, my mother showed up at my apartment on a Tuesday evening unannounced, with a stack of papers a notary had already stamped, asking me to sign the deeds of all 3 properties over to Roland to simplify the family's finances going forward. I refused, calmly, and told her I needed time to review it with my own attorney. That's when the real war started. The following Sunday was the dinner where she pointed her finger at me. But what I hadn't told you yet is what happened 40 minutes before that moment, in the kitchen, when it was just the 2 of us. "Andrea," she said, gripping the edge of the counter, "do you understand what you're doing to this family by being stubborn?" "I'm protecting what Grandma left me the way she asked me to protect it," I said. "Roland has plans," she said, "real plans. He wants to develop the East Point lot, put up a small complex, and he needs the equity from all 3 properties to secure the loan. This could set this family up for generations. Then let him bring me a business plan," I said. "Numbers, projections, a contract. I'll review it like any investor would, but I'm not signing my name off blind because he's charming at dinner." Her face changed then. Something desperate and cornered crossed it, and for 1 second I thought I saw my actual mother underneath, scared of something she wasn't saying. "He said if I can't deliver the properties, he's done," she whispered. "He said he didn't marry into a family that doesn't trust him." And there it was. The real threat had never been about me. It had always been about her fear of losing another husband. We walked back into that dining room, and 40 minutes later, in front of everybody, she pointed her finger at my chest and gave me an ultimatum built entirely on another man's manipulation. I looked her dead in the eye and said the words that would end that dinner. Grandma Odessa didn't survive a plant floor for 31 years and bury a husband alone just so I could hand her life's work to a man who's been married into this family for 18 months. I love you, Mama, but I will not do that. Not today, not ever. I left that house and drove straight to the office of David Ellison, the attorney who'd handled Grandma's estate from the beginning. It was nearly 8 at night, but he met me anyway, because he'd known Odessa Bryant for 20 years, and he'd promised her, personally, that he'd look after things if trouble ever came. We pulled the estate account's full transaction history. What we found went far beyond 3 withdrawals. Roland had, over the past year, used forged authorization to open a home equity line of credit against the Decatur house, the one property my mother lived in, the one I'd let them stay in rent-free, using a power of attorney document my mother didn't remember signing and Mr. Ellison confirmed had never been filed with the county. He'd forged it. Not badly either, well enough to fool a mother desperate to believe her husband would never hurt her. The line of credit was for $140,000. $60,000 had already been withdrawn and transferred to an LLC registered in Roland's name alone. An LLC that didn't own a single piece of property, employ a single contractor, or have a business license on file with the state of Georgia. There was no development plan. There had never been a development plan. There was only a man who married a grieving widow, waited 18 patient months, and slowly, carefully, positioned himself to drain everything her mother had built. I sat in that office with my hands shaking, and for the first time since the dinner, I didn't feel numb. I felt something sharper, something I could finally use. I didn't call my mother that night. I called the Fulton County District Attorney's Fraud Division the following morning, with Mr. Ellison beside me and every document laid out in order. It took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of investigators, forensic handwriting analysis, and a search warrant that pulled bank records Roland never expected anyone to look at closely. The forged power of attorney was the piece that broke the case wide open. A felony charge for financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, because my mother's grief and trust had made her exactly that. Roland was arrested on a Thursday morning at a gas station in Riverdale, trying to fill up a car that, it turned out, was also financed under fraudulent paperwork. My mother called me the night of his arrest, her voice hollowed out in a way I'd never heard before. "Andrea," she said, "I need you to tell me everything, please." So I did, all of it. The withdrawal slips, the forged power of attorney, the LLC that didn't exist on paper as anything real, the $60,000 that would take years, if ever, to recover. "I thought I was protecting my marriage," she whispered. "You were protecting his lies," I said, gently, because there was no cruelty left in me by then, only exhaustion and something close to grief for the mother I'd almost lost to a stranger's charm. "I need you to understand something, Mama. I never wanted to fight you. I wanted to protect what Grandma built, and that meant protecting you too, even when you couldn't see it." Malik called 2 days later. He didn't apologize outright. Some men never quite manage that, but he said, "I should have asked more questions before I called you lucky," which, from him, was close enough. It's been 14 months since that Sunday dinner. Roland took a plea deal. 4 years. With restitution he'll likely never fully pay. My mother sold the Riverdale Reminder that used to be her marriage and moved into the East Point house herself, renting the Decatur home out properly for the first time, splitting the income with me the way Grandma Odessa always intended for family to actually function, together but honest. The duplex on Boulevard is fully renovated now. I used part of the rental income to start a small property management company, Odessa Bryant Holdings, named for the woman who taught me that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's just an open door for anyone patient enough to walk through it. My mother and I talk every Sunday now, real conversations, not performances for an audience. She apologized once, fully, without excuses, sitting on my porch with sweet tea sweating in her hand, and I understood in that moment that she'd finally become the woman Grandma always believed she could be. Just years, and one costly heartbreak, later than any of us wanted. Aunt Pearl still tells anyone who will listen that she knew something was off about Roland from the first Thanksgiving. Kira eventually paid me back for the wedding gift Roland had convinced her to invest through him. Malik and I are closer now than we've been since childhood, rebuilding something neither of us realized we'd let erode. I think about my grandmother often, how she rocked on that porch and told me, plain as day, that she wasn't leaving anything for a man to talk my mother out of. She knew, somehow, before any of us did, exactly what kind of protection her family would need. I didn't just protect 3 properties. I protected the truth of who built them, and in the end, that truth is what set my mother free. Thank you for watching all the way through. If you enjoyed today's story, a quick like and a subscription would mean a lot. And don't forget to tell me in the comments what you think happened after the final scene. I'll see you in the next adventure.